Before we submit our college applications, I help our homeroom teacher hand out each student's sealed official records envelope as the class monitor. But the class belle, Vivian Nash, says she's an art student who's about to debut as a celebrity. To thank everyone for taking care of her, she asks the whole class to tear open their sealed envelopes and slip one of her glamour shots inside, so they can share in her good luck. My boyfriend, Dunn, immediately steps up as her childhood friend. He says he doesn't just want one of her photos, but he also wants her autograph on his envelope. Afraid something might go wrong, I immediately warn him that opening the sealed envelope could negatively affect his application to Caldoria University's School of Foreign Service. Before I can even finish speaking, Brandon kicks me hard in the stomach. The other students laugh and mock me. You're just stirring up trouble for no reason. Everyone knows what you're really thinking. You're just afraid Vivian will get back together with your boyfriend. I'm so furious, I can't even find the words. But due to my responsibility as the class monitor, I call our homeroom teacher over and forcefully stop the absurd stunt. Later, everyone gets into their dream colleges. Well, everyone except for Vivian. At our class reunion 6 months later, Vivian suddenly bursts into tears in front of the entire class. She accuses loudly, "Why did you isolate me? It's your fault I made a mistake on my college application." I'm dumbfounded. Suddenly, she grabs me by the throat and forces poisoned liquor down my throat. I die before I can be saved. After my death, Brandon and our classmates all defend Vivian. They even paint me as the class bully. Meanwhile, she goes viral by live streaming her sob story and quickly becomes a rising celebrity. When I open my eyes again, I'm back at the moment Brandon is eagerly playing the gallant knight backing up his damsel. This time, I take the initiative and hand him his sealed envelope. I think Vivian is right. It'd be nice to keep one of her photos as a souvenir. Vivian Nash's hand faltered for a brief moment as she took out the photo, her sharp gaze landing directly on me. It was then that the classmate next to me smirked and intentionally nudged me with their shoulder. If you're jealous of Vivian, you should just say so, Mabel. I don't think it's jealousy. It's insecurity. I mean, who wouldn't feel insecure right next to Vivian? Our class belle? Mabel clearly brought that on herself. Brandon and Vivian are childhood sweethearts, but she still insists on coming between them. Vivian, amused by the comments, cast me a guarded glance and then said, "You actually agreed to it so readily, Mabel. You're not thinking of using Brandon to get hold of my photo and then vandalize it, are you?" I was wondering why Mabel was being so nice for once. It turns out she just wants to ruin the glamour shots Vivian specifically had taken. Mabel wouldn't dare. Brandon Dunn, my boyfriend, snapped as he grabbed me by the neck and slammed me to the ground. He finally loosened his grip once he noticed my face turning purple from suffocation. He then threatened me before he got up, whispering, "I'll make your life a living hell if you dare ruin Vivian's photos." Those around applauded one after another, marveling at Brandon's macho display. Vivian instinctively wrapped her arm around Brandon's. She then playfully stuck her tongue out before saying softly, "I'll keep my absolute favorite photo for you when I get them, Brandon." Brandon affectionately pinched her cheek and said, "It's up to you, Vivian." I remained completely unmoved as I watched their sweet, intimate behavior. In my past life, I had successfully stopped Vivian's absurd actions. I explained to everyone that the official records envelope could affect their future schooling or employment, and that tearing it open on their own would be highly detrimental. I didn't expect that my sincere attempts to reason with them only earned me the reputation of a jealous woman. Is that lousy official records envelope really that important? I bet you're just trying to stop us from keeping Vivian's photos. She's just making a fuss like this because she's ugly and insecure. She's worried that Vivian and Brandon might rekindle their old flame and ditch her. If we go by what Mabel is saying, Vivian is actually at fault here, even though she was sweet enough to get these glamour shots done for us to enjoy. I tried hard to clear things up, but Brandon slapped me across the face in front of everyone without a second thought. He stepped back from me in disgust and barked, "I didn't realize before that you were so consumed by jealousy. You'd better stop crossing the line over some photos, Mabel." He shoved his own official records envelope into Vivian's hands after saying that. "You can go ahead and open it, Vivian. Oh, and make sure to sign the photos before putting them inside the envelope." Thus, with Brandon leading the way, the other classmates quickly followed suit. I want an autograph too. Vivian is bound to be a huge celebrity later on, so her signature will definitely be worth something. I know, right? I want one too. I mean, being able to tell people down the road that I went to school with a celebrity is going to give me so many bragging rights. I was worried that something would go wrong, so I quickly called John Lister, our homeroom teacher, over, which was the only reason everyone's official records envelope was saved. I had no idea that my good deed, far from earning their gratitude, would bring about my own death instead. Yet, What struck me the most was that after Vivian forced the poison drink on me, Brandon came forward to defend her, while my other classmates told the police that I'd taken my own life. In their skewed accounts, I became the villainous bully, while Vivian went viral online by playing the innocent victim. In the end, Vivian caught the eye of a director and instantly skyrocketed to stardom. I snapped back to the present as the sound of the envelopes being torn open echoed one after another. I watched as everyone eagerly handed their official records envelopes to Vivian, who unhurriedly inserted her own stunning photo inside. Vivian then giggled, putting a hand over her mouth. "Thanks for cheering me on, everyone. I'll never forget you all after I make my debut." I cast a cold glance at everyone and turned to walk out of the classroom. I was just about to head home when Vivian suddenly appeared behind me and put a hand on my shoulder, a calculating look in her eyes. I felt my heart sink as I helplessly watched Vivian tear up her own photo and begin sobbing hysterically. "Why did you have to tear up the photo when I was nice enough to give it to you, Mabel?" I widened my eyes in disbelief as I asked, "What the hell are you saying?" Brandon rushed out and kicked me to the ground right after I finished speaking. He held Vivian tightly in his arms, asking anxiously, "Are you all right, Vivian?" Vivian wiped away her tears and choked out, "I gave Mabel my glamour shot out of the goodness of my heart, only for her to rip it to pieces." She gave a bow to apologize to me after saying that. "I'm so sorry, Mabel. I know my relationship with Brandon has upset you. I'm really sorry for that." She blinked her eyes innocently a couple of times, then gently pushed Brandon's arm away. "I swear I'll stay away from Brandon from now on, so please don't be mad at me anymore, Mabel." "You're such a bitch, Mabel." I had barely stumbled back to my feet when Brandon shoved me hard onto the ground again, causing my lower back to land right on some sharp gravel. I winced in pain. Yet, that minor physical reaction was interpreted by the other classmates as a sign of defiance. "I honestly didn't think you would stoop this low, Mabel. I mean, Vivian actually went out of her way to give you one of her photos. You could have just refused it if you didn't want it. Why did you have to rip it to pieces? What other reason could there be?" She's just downright jealous of Vivian. Vivian is beautiful, while she looks like a complete country bumpkin standing right next to her. It's a good thing we caught her in the act of destroying Vivian's photo. I mean, who knows how Mabel has been using her role as class monitor to bully Vivian when no one else was looking? Those around completely pushed Brandon over the edge. He strode over and loomed above me, asking, "Which hand did you use to tear it?" I was just about to speak, but Brandon brought his foot down hard on my right hand. The pain overwhelmed me immediately, causing tears to surge out from the sheer agony. "Is this the hand?" Brandon lifted his foot slightly, then brought it down again with all his might, stomping so hard that I clearly heard the sound of a bone snapping. It was a few seconds later when Brandon moved to my left hand and stepped on it once more. "You're truly disgusting, Mabel." Seeing that the beating had gone far enough, Vivian finally reached out calmly and grabbed Brandon's arm. She shook her head slightly and said, "You should stop now, Brandon. I'm scared." Mabel isn't to blame for this. It was just my own wishful thinking, so it has nothing to do with her. If anyone's at fault, it's me for showing up and messing up your relationship. Mabel was right a moment ago. You two are the actual couple, whereas I'm just the third wheel. Brandon's resolve dissolved entirely after hearing that, prompting him to immediately break up with me. Those around us couldn't help but look down on me with disgust. "Haven't you heard? Those who aren't loved are the third wheels. You're the one who came between them, Mabel. You really think you're all that with that ugly face of yours, huh? It's good to have confidence, Mabel, but being overly confident is crossing the line." I struggled to push myself up from the ground. Brandon had been ruthless, and the back of my hand was already covered in dark bruises. It hurt terribly, but the pain brought a sudden, sharp clarity to my mind. In my past life, I had been completely blinded by love, unable to see Vivian's manipulative nature or Brandon's unwavering devotion to her, which ultimately led to my tragic death. In this life, I could only wait impatiently for my admission letter to arrive. I licked my lips and started a countdown for the disasters heading their way as I watched everyone leave. It wasn't long before the admission letters arrived, and I successfully received my own admission notice. Just then, Mr. Lister showed up holding a pile of printed transcripts. "Please come with me for home visits in a bit, Mabel. There are a few students in our class who failed their exams, so we need to offer them guidance and support." I nodded and looked over the names on it. Vivian's name stood out clearly in front of me. It appeared that Vivian's failure to secure a spot at a university was predestined. I only lamented my own fate, having been forced to take the blame in my past life. It was entirely expected that she wouldn't get into any university, though. She was always taking leaves of absence during senior year, with each one lasting half a month or longer. She said she was going to audition for acting roles, but in truth, she was simply spending freely and living it up. It wasn't long before Mr. Lister and I arrived at Vivian's house. Just before entering, a man's furious voice rang out from inside. How could you tell me that you didn't get into any university when I've already told everyone that you made it, Vivian? Didn't you say you were guaranteed a spot at Caldoria Film Academy? What happened to that, Vivian? In the next instant, a crisp slap rang out from inside the house. Mr. Lister, worried that things might get out of hand, rushed inside. I wasn't about to miss out on the show, so I naturally went in too. I immediately noticed that the living room was in complete disarray, with Vivian's makeup scattered across the floor. Mr. Lister asked, "How did this happen, Vivian? Your academic results are usually fine. You ranked in the top 10 of your entire class for all 3 mock exams. You should have easily gotten into a prestigious university with such a result." Vivian kept her head down, while Peter Nash, her father, sighed heavily. "It seems like we completely misjudged the situation this time, Mr. Lister. We didn't realize the Film Academy's cutoff would be so high. Vivian got over 1344 for her SAT and still didn't make it." I acted surprised. "Didn't you score 560 for your SAT, Vivian?" In that instant, everyone in the room fell silent. I unhurriedly took out the printed transcript and handed it over to Peter. "Did you perhaps misread her score, Mr. Nash? Vivian's actual score is written right here." Mr. Lister shook his head in resignation. Why couldn't Vivian pull it off when it mattered, especially when she did so well in her previous exams? I said, sneering, "It's probably because she depended on technology during her usual exams." That single remark alone caused the expressions of all 3 present to shift. Vivian flew into a rage and lunged at me, as if she wanted to tear me apart on the spot. Peter, however, yanked her back before she could even touch me. He then slapped her hard across the face, sending her rolling onto the floor. "How dare you lie to me?" Mr. Lister stood there awkwardly, trapped between wanting to leave out of embarrassment and wanting to stay without a good excuse to do so. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratification after looking at Vivian's miserable state. It was only just the beginning, though. It wasn't long before Brandon heard Vivian's agonized cries and quickly ran over, grabbing Peter's arm. "What are you doing, Mr. Nash?" Brandon grew increasingly anxious when he saw his beloved swollen, bruised face. Mr. Lister was even more frantic than he was. "You're here at just the right time, Brandon. Do you know why you weren't accepted into any university?" Brandon, who had been fully intent on intervening, froze where he stood, his anxious expression instantly paralyzing. "What are you talking about, Mr. Lister?" Mr. Lister shot him an irritated look. "Why didn't you get into the university even though your SAT scores were high enough, Brandon? Do you have any idea what happened?" Brandon's breathing turned shallow and rapid. He let out a nervous chuckle as he shook his head rapidly. "You've got to be kidding me, right? You ought to know that my SAT scores were more than enough to guarantee a spot at Caldoria University's School of Foreign Service." He then held out his hands and continued, "You'd better stop messing with me, Mr. Lister. I'd like to take a look at my admission letter now." Mr. Lister looked completely bewildered. "What admission letter? How could you have an admission letter when you weren't even accepted into any university?" He quickly took out the list and pointed at it. "You can take a look at it yourself. Here's the school's official list of those who didn't get admitted into any university, and your name is on it." Brandon swayed and took a few steps back. That's impossible." He frantically took out his phone, and once he confirmed the lack of any admission update, he completely broke down and screamed. "How can this be? Why did I fail to get admitted?" He rushed forward and grabbed Mr. Lister's sleeve. "You know what my scores were, Mr. Lister. You know that I met the requirements. I saw the acceptance announcements for Caldoria University's School of Foreign Service online this morning, and people with lower scores than I got in. Why was I left out? Did the university make a mistake? How could this happen to me, Mr. Lister?" Mr. Lister was equally surprised. "You should have been admitted to the university, by all accounts." I couldn't help but smirk when I looked at Brandon, who had completely broken down right in front of me. He had decent grades and plenty of confidence, which was why he had only applied to Caldoria University's School of Foreign Service and nowhere else. He had listed several prestigious universities among his remaining options, but his scores fell far short of their requirements. In the end, he wasn't admitted to any university. Peter couldn't help but ask, "You didn't get admitted into any university as well, Brandon?" He seemed worried outwardly, but I could still hear a hint of suppressed joy in his voice. Brandon went completely pale, utterly lost for words. In the meantime, as the situation grew increasingly tense, Mr. Lister's phone rang a few times. In about 10 minutes or so, every single classmate who hadn't been accepted into a university showed up at Vivian's house. They all had scores high enough to get admitted to a university. There were others with the same or even lower marks who had already received acceptance letters, yet they had somehow been rejected. They were frantic, but their parents were even more panicked, constantly pestering Mr. Lister to find out what exactly went wrong. Why didn't my daughter get accepted into a single university even though she has decent scores for her SAT? Did your system glitch or something? You're well aware of my son's capabilities, Mr. Lister. He should have easily qualified for a standard university placement. How is it possible that he's completely unplaced? Mr. Lister was even more baffled. He then stated firmly, I'm certain that there is a glitch in the system somewhere. I cleared my throat and said softly, I know why it happened. In that instant, everyone turned to look at me. Brandon finally took notice of my presence and asked with a scoff, Didn't we break up already, Mabel? Why are you still shamelessly following me around? Those surrounding classmates joined in the snickering. Isn't it obvious? I mean, all of us failed to secure admission, so her presence here is undoubtedly because she was also left without a placement. Did you come here because you still can't let go of Brandon, Mabel? I ignored their taunts, merely asking, Aren't any of you curious about why you actually got rejected? I pointed directly at Vivian as I met their bewildered stares. You ought to know that the reason you are all without a university placement is entirely due to Vivian, our class belle. You'd better stop making things up, Mabel. What does Vivian have to do with any of this? I swallowed hard, then solemnly explained to them the absolute importance of the official records envelope. Mr. Lister got a massive headache just listening to this. He exclaimed, Did you guys actually tear open the official records envelope? He looked at everyone with frustration and asked, Do you have any idea how important the official records envelope is? The silence in the living room was so thick it was suffocating. The hum of the cheap air conditioner in the corner of Vivian's living room seemed to grow louder, vibrating against the tense, damp air of the summer afternoon. Mr. Lister's face went from pale to a deep, congested red. He stared at the list of unplaced students in his hand, then slowly looked up, his gaze sweeping across the anxious faces of the classmates who had crowded into the room. What do you mean, Mabel? Mr. Lister's voice trembled, a mixture of disbelief and rising dread. What does Vivian have to do with their files? Speak clearly. I stood near the doorway, leaning slightly against the wooden frame. The movement sent a dull, throbbing ache through my lower back, a reminder of the gravel Brandon had shoved me into just weeks prior. I looked down at my hands. My right hand was still wrapped in a tight, ugly medical splint, the skin around. The edges of the bandages bruised a sickening shade of yellow and purple. Brandon's stomp had fractured 2 of my metacarpal bones. The doctor said I might never regain full dexterity in that hand, but right now, looking at the sheer terror in Brandon's eyes, the pain felt like a badge of honor. It's very simple, Mr. Lister, I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. The official records envelope is a confidential, legally sealed document. It contains a student's high school transcripts, physical evaluation forms, ideological assessments, and national exam registration data. According to the State Department of Education's strict guidelines, these envelopes must remain sealed with the high school's official wax stamp until they are opened by the registrar of the admitting university. I paused, letting my gaze drift to Brandon, whose face was rapidly draining of all color. If the seal is broken by anyone else, especially the student themselves, the integrity of the files is legally compromised. The Bureau of Education classifies it as document tampering. When universities received the admission packages and saw the torn seals, the automated system immediately flagged them, invalidated their qualifications, and revoked their admissions. No, that's a lie, a girl named Chloe screamed from the back of the crowd. She was a cheerleader who had always trailed behind Vivian like a loyal shadow. We didn't tamper with anything. We just put a photo inside. We didn't change any grades. A photo. Mr. Lister's voice cracked. He looked like he was about to faint. You opened your official records? The ones I specifically told you were confidential and must be submitted intact. But Vivian said it was fine. Another classmate, Leo, stammered, his eyes wide with rising panic. His mother, who was standing right next to him, suddenly grabbed his arm so hard her knuckles turned white. What did you do, Leo? She demanded, her voice rising to a shriek. What did you open? Tell me right now. Mom, Vivian said she was going to be a star. She said, if we put her signed glamour shot inside our envelopes, we'd share in her good luck. Brandon did it first. He said it was a great idea, so we all did it. Leo's voice broke into a sob as the gravity of the situation began to settle over him. You stupid, brainless idiot. Leo's mother screamed, swinging her heavy designer purse and hitting him squarely in the chest. We spent thousands on your tutors. Your father pulled every favor he had to get your SAT scores up. And you ruined it for a cheap picture of some girl? The living room erupted into chaos. Parents who had arrived looking for answers were now turning on their own children, slapping, shaking, and screaming at them. The air was filled with the sound of desperate crying, angry shouts, and the bitter recriminations of families watching their hard-earned futures vanish into thin air. Through it all, Brandon stood frozen. His eyes were fixed on the floor, his chest heaving as he tried to process the words.
No.
Caldoria University wouldn't do that. My scores were perfect.
They wanted me. They wouldn't reject
me over a piece of paper. It's not just a piece of paper, Brandon, I said softly, ensuring my voice carried over the din. It's the law. You wanted Vivian's autograph on your envelope so badly, didn't you? You even threatened to make my life a living hell if I ruined her photos. Well, look at them now. They're safely tucked inside your invalid files. Mabel, you knew this would happen. Vivian, who had been huddled on the floor clutching her swollen cheek, suddenly sprang to her feet like a cornered animal. Her beautifully styled hair was disheveled, and the heavy makeup she wore was smeared with tears and sweat.
She
pointed a trembling, manicured finger at me. You did this on purpose. You're the class monitor. If you knew the envelopes couldn't be opened, why didn't you stop us? Why did you just watch us do it? You wanted to ruin our lives. Her accusation was like a spark thrown into a powder keg. The frantic classmates and their furious parents all turned their tear-stained, angry faces toward me. Yeah, Mabel, you're the monitor. Why didn't you say anything? Chloe sobbed, her face red. You're supposed to look out for us. She wanted this. Brandon roared, his despair finally morphing into violent
rage.
He took a menacing step toward me, his fists clenched. She's been jealous of Vivian from the very beginning. She less opened them because she wanted to see us fail. You vindictive, ugly bitch. Before Brandon could reach me, Mr. Lister stepped between us, his face dark with anger. Stand down, Brandon. Don't you dare lay a hand on her. Mr. Lister, she ruined us. Brandon yelled, tears of frustration streaming down his face. She ruined you? I let out a cold, sharp laugh that cut through the tension in the room. I took a step forward, stepping out from behind Mr. Lister, and raised my splinted right hand, holding it directly in front of Brandon's face. Have you forgotten what happened 2 weeks ago, Brandon? Or did that tiny brain of yours wipe the memory to protect your fragile ego? The room went quiet. All eyes fell on the heavy medical binding on my hand. In the classroom, when Vivian first suggested opening the envelopes, I tried to warn you, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper. I told you that opening those envelopes would ruin your chances at Caldoria University.
And
what did you do? I turned my gaze to the other classmates, meeting their eyes one by one. You laughed at me. You said I was a country bumpkin. You said I was just a jealous, insecure, ugly girl who was afraid Vivian would steal my boyfriend back. And Brandon, my loving boyfriend, shoved me to the ground, dragged me by my hair, and stomped on my hands until the bones snapped. I took another step closer to Brandon, who instinctively flinched. I have the hospital records, Brandon. I have the police report I filed for domestic abuse and assault. I tried to do my duty as the class monitor. I tried to save your pathetic futures. But you beat me into silence. You broke my bones to prove how loyal you were to your childhood sweetheart. So tell me, everyone, how exactly is this my fault? A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the room. The parents, who had been ready to tear me apart, looked at my splinted hand and then at Brandon there, expressions turning from anger to disgust. Is this true? Leo's mother asked, her voice trembling as she stared at Brandon. You beat the class monitor because she tried to keep you from destroying your own files? Brandon's mouth worked soundlessly. He looked around the room, desperate for support, but even his closest friends were backing away from him, eager to distance themselves from the violence. Vivian, help me out here, Brandon stammered, reaching out to grasp Vivian's hand. We did it together. Tell them she's lying. But Vivian, ever the opportunist, coldly pulled her hand away. She stepped back, her eyes darting around the room as she calculated her next move. I didn't. No, Brandon. I'm just an art student. I didn't know the rules were so strict. You were the one who insisted on opening yours first. You forced everyone else to do it too. Brandon stared at her, his heart visibly breaking as his goddess threw him under the bus without a single shred of hesitation. Vivian, how could you say that? He whispered, his voice cracking. I did it. For you. I broke Mabel's hand for you. And look where that got you. I said, a cold, satisfied smile spreading across my face. An invalid file, a rejected admission, and a pending criminal charge for assault. Congratulations, Brandon. You really played the gallant knight. Within 48 hours, the full scale of the disaster became public. The story of a high school graduating class collectively invalidating their university admissions to insert a classmate's glamour shots spread like wildfire. It was too absurd, too tragic, and too incredibly stupid not to go viral. Local news outlets picked up the story, and soon, national education forums were discussing the confidential envelope incident. The Bureau of Education issued a formal public statement reiterating the absolute severity of the confidential file policy and confirming that under no circumstances would tampered files be reevaluated for the current academic year. For Brandon, Leo, Chloe, and the 12 other classmates who had opened their envelopes, the doors to higher education were slammed shut and triple-locked. I sat in a cozy cafe near my house, sipping a cold peach tea and scrolling through the local forums. The comment sections were ruthless. Are kids these days really this brainless? Ruining their entire future for a signed photo of some wannabe influencer? The ex-boyfriend who broke the class monitor's hand deserves jail time. Absolute animal. I heard the class belle, who started this isn't even smart. She failed her SATs and lied to her parents. What a joke. As I scrolled, a shadow fell over my table. I looked up to see Brandon's mother, Mrs. Dunn. She looked as though she had aged 10 years in the span of 3 days. Her usually immaculate hair was messy, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Mabel, she whispered, her voice trembling.
Please.
We need to talk. I didn't invite her to sit, but she pulled out the chair opposite me anyway, collapsing into it. She reached across the table, trying to grasp my hands, but I quickly withdrew my splinted right hand, resting it protectively in my lap. Her hands hovered in the air for a moment before she let them drop, her face twisting in shame. Mabel, I know Brandon did a terrible, unforgivable thing to you, she sobbed, tears spilling over her wrinkled cheeks. I scolded him. His father threw him out of the house. He's staying at his uncle's place now. But please, you have a good relationship with Mr. Lister, and the school board respects you. Is there any way you can speak to them? Can you write a petition?
Tell them it was a
misunderstanding. Tell them the students didn't know. A misunderstanding, Mrs. Dunn? I asked, my voice dry. I told them exactly what would happen. I was beaten for it. If I go to the school board now and say they didn't know, I would be lying under oath. He's your boyfriend, Mabel, she pleaded, her voice rising in desperation.
You
loved him. You can't just watch his life be ruined. Caldoria University was his dream. If he can't go, he has nothing. He was my boyfriend. I corrected her, my tone steady and completely devoid of emotion. He became my ex-boyfriend the moment he slammed my head against the classroom floor and stepped on my hands. And as for his dream, he chose to sacrifice it on the altar of Vivian Nash. He should be happy.
He has her signed
photo. He can look at it while he works whatever minimum wage job will take a high school dropout with a violent criminal record. You heartless girl. Mrs. Dunn gasped, her desperation turning into bitter resentment. You're doing this out of spite. You're glad this happened to him. Yes, I said, leaning forward, my eyes locking onto hers. I am incredibly glad. Because for once in his life, Brandon Dunn is getting exactly what he deserves. Now, please leave my table before I call the staff to have you removed for harassment. She stared at me, realizing there was no warmth left in me to exploit, no lingering affection she could manipulate. Shaking, she stood up and stumbled out of the cafe, her tears staining the glass door as she left. While the rest of the class was descending into chaos, my life proceeded smoothly. Because I had refused to participate in Vivian's little stunt, my official records envelope remained perfectly sealed. When Caldoria University's School of Foreign Service processed my application, they found my flawless academic record, my high SAT scores, and my pristine file. My official admission letter arrived in a thick, crisp envelope, embossed with the university's gold seal. I was going to Caldoria. The rest of the summer flew by. I spent my days going to physical therapy for my hand, reading preparatory materials for my international relations courses, and enjoying the quiet peace of a life free from Brandon's toxic jealousy and Vivian's manipulative drama. The police investigation into my assault proceeded quickly, with Mr. Lister's statement, the medical reports, and the testimonies of several classmates who wanted to gain favor with the authorities. Brandon was formally charged with third-degree assault and domestic battery. Because he was technically still a minor by a few weeks at the time of the incident, his lawyer managed to negotiate a plea deal, 2 years of probation, a mandatory anger management program, and a permanent restraining order keeping him at least 500 yards away from me. His clean record was gone. His future in public service or diplomacy careers that strictly vet applicants for criminal records was completely dead. As for Vivian, she tried to salvage her reputation by launching her promised social media debut. She posted a heavily edited video, crying to the camera, about how bureaucratic red tape and spiteful classmates had ruined her dream of attending the Caldoria Film Academy. But the internet is not easily fooled. Within hours of her upload, local students leaked her actual SAT scores, the dismal 560, alongside proof that she had cheated on her high school midterms. The public backlash was immediate and brutal. Her comment section was flooded with green tea emojis, and she was labeled the confidential clown. The small talent agency that had expressed interest in her quickly dropped her, citing a disalignment of values. By the time autumn arrived, I packed my bags and left my hometown without looking back. 6 months later, the transition to university life was everything I had hoped for.
Caldoria.
University was beautiful, the professors were brilliant, and I made friends who valued intelligence and kindness over superficial drama. My hand had mostly healed, leaving only a faint, jagged scar across my knuckles, a quiet reminder of the past I had escaped. Then, in late February, my phone buzzed with a notification from our high school class group chat. It was a group I had muted months ago, but the sheer volume of pings forced me to open it. Chloe. Hey everyone, it's been 6 months since graduation. A lot of us are staying in town or repeating the year at prep schools. We're putting together a class reunion this Saturday at the Grand Jade restaurant. We really hope everyone can make it. Leo. Yeah, let's put the past behind us. We're still class of 26. We should catch up. Vivian. I hope you can make it, Mabel. I really want to apologize to you in person for everything that happened. Let's start fresh. I stared at Vivian's message. A cold chill washed over me, a phantom sensation of burning liquid sliding down my throat. In my past life, the class reunion had been the stage of my death. Vivian, ruined and desperate, had cornered me, accused me of isolating her, and forced poison liquor down my throat while Brandon and the others watched or assisted, only to cover it up as a suicide afterward. This time, the timeline had shifted. They were ruined, yes, but why were they inviting me now? Was it another trap? I sat at my desk, my fingers tapping against the wood. If I didn't go, I would remain safe in my university dorm. But as long as Vivian and Brandon remained desperate and free, they would always be a lingering threat, a pair of venomous snakes waiting in the grass. To truly end this, I had to cut off their heads. I picked up my phone and typed a reply. Mabel, sure. I'll be there. See you guys on Saturday. Immediately after sending the message, I dialed another number. Hi, Detective Vance. This is Mabel. I have some information regarding a potential threat to my safety, and I'd like to set up a precautionary measure. The Grand Jade restaurant was a moderately expensive establishment on the edge of our hometown, known for its private dining rooms. When I pushed open the heavy wooden door of room 302, the conversation inside instantly died. The room smelled of cheap cologne, stale beer, and hot pot broth. Around the large circular table sat 12 of my former classmates. They looked vastly different from the bright-eyed, arrogant teenagers of 6 months ago. Chloe's hair was dark and unstyled, her designer clothes replaced by a faded sweatshirt. Leo looked exhausted, deep dark circles under his eyes, likely from the grueling hours at the cram school his parents had forced him into. And then there was Brandon and Vivian. Brandon sat in the corner, his shoulders hunched. He had lost weight, his jawline sharp and hollow. He didn't look up when I walked in, his eyes staring blankly into his glass of beer. Vivian sat next to him. She was dressed in a flashy, revealing red dress that looked entirely out of place for a casual gathering. Her makeup was thick, almost mask-like, trying to cover the hollow expression on her face. When she saw me, her eyes flared with a mixture of intense hatred and a manic, forced
Joy.
Mabel, you actually came, Vivian squealed, rising from her seat and clapping her hands together. We were so worried you'd look down on us now that you're a big shot student at Caldoria. I promised I'd come, I said, walking in calmly. I didn't take off my coat, keeping my hands slipped inside my pockets. Inside my left pocket, a small, highly sensitive audio recorder was already running. Inside my right pocket, my fingers rested on the panic button of a personal GPS tracker connected directly to Detective Vance's team, who were parked just down the street. Sit, Chloe said, pulling out a chair right between herself and Vivian. I sat down, my posture straight. So, how has everyone been? I asked, keeping my tone light. How do you think we've been, Mabel? Leo muttered bitterly, swirling his drink. We're stuck repeating high school courses with kids 2 years younger than us. All because of some stupid photos. Leo, don't be like that, Vivian said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness as she poured a amber-colored liquid from a premium-looking glass decanter into a small porcelain cup. We agreed tonight is about moving forward. And most importantly, it's about making peace with Mabel. She slid the cup toward me. The liquid rippled slightly under the harsh fluorescent lights of the private room. I bought this special plum wine from an import shop, Vivian said, her eyes fixed on my face, her pupils dilated with a strange, frantic energy. It's very
Rare.
I wanted to pour the first cup for you, Mabel, to show my sincerity.
Let's
Drink to the past being the past. I looked at the cup. The scent of sweet plums was incredibly strong, almost too strong, as if trying to mask something bitter, something chemical. My mind flashed back to my past life. The burning in my throat, the suffocation, the cold laughter of my classmates as I gasped for air on the dirty floor of a similar private room. Why aren't you drinking, Mabel? Brandon's voice suddenly rang out. He finally looked up, his eyes bloodshot and hollow. Vivian is apologizing to you.
don't.
Tell me you're still too arrogant to accept her apology. Yeah, Mabel. Don't be a party pooper, Chloe urged, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. She looked nervous, her eyes darting between me and the decanter. I smiled faintly, picking up the porcelain cup. It's a lovely gesture, Vivian. Truly. But my doctor said I shouldn't drink alcohol while my hand is still recovering from the nerve damage. The medication I'm on doesn't mix well with spirits. Vivian's hand, resting on the table, visibly clenched into a fist. It's just 1 cup, Mabel. Surely a little bit won't hurt? Are you really going to reject my apology over a doctor's note? If it's just about the apology, I accept it, I said, sliding the cup back toward her. Why don't you drink it instead, Vivian?
To seal our
Reconciliation. Vivian's face went entirely stiff. She stared at the cup as if it were a venomous spider. I've already had too much to drink tonight. I can't. Really? Your glass is completely empty, I noted, pointing to the dry cup in front of her. Come on, Vivian. If you won't drink it, and I can't drink it, why don't we let Brandon have it? He's always been your biggest supporter. I pushed the cup toward Brandon. Brandon reached out his hand to grab it, but Vivian suddenly shrieked, lunging across the table and knocking the cup out of his hand. Smash! The porcelain shattered against the floor, the dark amber liquid splashing across the cheap carpet. A faint, acrid, almond-like odor began to rise from the damp fabric. The room went dead silent. Vivian? Brandon stared at her, his hand frozen in midair.
What are you
Doing? Vivian was panting, her face pale as a sheet. I didn't want you to drink after her. It's dirty. She rejected my apology, so why should we give her the satisfaction? Is that really why, Vivian? I asked, my voice deadly quiet as I stood up from my chair. Or is it because that wine is spiked with a lethal dose of paraquat? A collective gasp echoed through the room. Paraquat? Leo squeaked, jumping back from the table. The herbicide? Vivian, what is she talking about? She's crazy. She's making things up to frame me. Vivian screamed, her voice cracking into a high-pitched hysteria. She's always wanted to ruin me. Brandon,
help me?
she's crazy. But Brandon didn't move. He stared at the dark stain on the carpet, then slowly looked up at Vivian, a sickening realization finally dawning in his eyes. Vivian, Brandon whispered, his voice trembling. Before we came here tonight, you asked me to make sure the door to the private room was locked from the inside. You said you wanted to make sure we had privacy to talk to. Mabel, what did you put in that bottle? Nothing. I didn't put anything, Vivian sobbed, backing away toward the wall. I think the police will be the judge of that, I said, pulling my right hand out of my pocket and showing them the active GPS tracker, its small green light, flashing steadily. Right on cue, the heavy wooden door of room 302 was violently kicked open. Police. Nobody move. 3 uniformed officers, led by Detective Vance, burst into the room, their guns drawn. Behind them, 2 forensics technicians carrying specimen bags quickly secured the shattered porcelain pieces and the remaining liquid in the decanter. Mabel, are you all right? Detective Vance asked, stepping in front of me. I'm fine, Detective. I didn't touch the drink, I said, handing him the audio recorder from my pocket. But I have a full recording of Vivian Nash attempting to coerce me into drinking a substance she knew was lethal, and her violent reaction when I tried to offer it to someone else.
No.
It's a setup, Vivian shrieked as an officer stepped forward and grabbed her arms, forcing them behind her back. The cold metal of the handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists. Mabel, you bitch. I'll kill you. I'll tear your face off. She thrashed wildly, her expensive red dress tearing at the seams, her heavy makeup running with sweat and tears of pure, unadulterated terror. The glamour, the arrogance, the class belle facade, all of it stripped away to reveal the desperate, ugly monster underneath. Brandon sat frozen in his chair as the police officers led Vivian away. As she passed him, she spat on his face. You useless coward. You couldn't even help me do this, right? I hate you. I wish I had never met you. Brandon didn't even wipe the saliva from his cheek. He just sat there, his eyes hollow, his spirit completely broken. Detective Vance turned his gaze to the rest of the classmates, who were huddled in the corner, trembling. All of you are coming down to the station for questioning as potential accessories to attempted murder. Move it. The forensic report came back 2 days later. The import plum wine Vivian had brought to the restaurant was laced with a concentration of paraquat high enough to cause rapid multi-organ failure and death within hours. Search warrants executed at Vivian's house revealed her search history, which included queries on tasteless poisons, how to purchase restricted herbicides online, and how to get away with murder by making it look like suicide. Because she had planned the act beforehand, purchased the poison under a fake name, and attempted to carry it out in front of witnesses, the state prosecution charged her with attempted first-degree murder. Given the overwhelming physical evidence, her recorded confession during her panic, and her internet search history, her lawyer didn't even attempt to plead not guilty. She was sentenced to 25 years in a maximum security state penitentiary without the possibility of parole. Brandon, though not directly involved in the purchasing of the poison, was charged as an accomplice due to his attempts to pressure me into drinking it and his role in locking the door. However, because his defense successfully argued that he was psychologically manipulated by Vivian and had no direct knowledge of the poison, he received a reduced sentence, 3 years in a correctional facility, followed by 5 years of strict probation. His family was completely ruined by the legal fees, and they were forced to sell their suburban house and move to a remote, impoverished town in another state to escape the relentless public shame. The other classmates, while released after questioning, were forever branded as accomplices to a murder. No prep school would keep them, and their prospects of ever entering a reputable university were permanently destroyed. They were destined to live out their lives in the shadow of the confidential envelope incident, forever mocked, forever unplaced. 1 year later, the spring breeze at Caldoria University was sweet, carrying the scent of fresh cherry blossoms. I walked down the stone path of the campus, a stack of textbooks cradled in my left arm. My right hand, completely healed now save for the faint, pale scar across my knuckles, held a warm cup of coffee. My phone buzzed with an email notification. I opened it to find an official acceptance letter from the Department of State's summer internship program. I had been selected to work at the embassy in Geneva. I paused under the shade of a massive oak tree, looking up at the clear blue sky. In my past life, my story had ended in pain, betrayal, and a dirty floor, my name dragged through the mud while my killers thrived. But in this life, I had rewritten the script. I took a slow, deep breath of the fresh spring air, a quiet, peaceful smile spreading across my face. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and walked forward, stepping out of the shadows and directly into the bright, beautiful future I had fought so hard to reclaim.